Hi, welcome back to another episode of Realty Resilience. I'm your host, David Nations, and I'm super excited about today's topic and our guest. We're changing it up a little bit today from our one-on-one conversations with top agents around the country to some top real estate investors, and changing the focus today around building wealth through real estate and how, as real estate agents, you can be tapping into real estate investing. I've got three great guys here: Dave Stelmacki, Jim Wehmeier, and Chris Lance. And actually, all four of us all work together on Nations Network real estate team as well. But what's great about our group is that we've got all four of us really do some different things within real estate investing. And my goal today was to dive in and talk about that and highlight what each of these guys are doing, how they're doing it, so then you can learn from them and be able to take one or all of these ways of getting into real estate investing and get after it. So let's jump in. Dave, we'll start with you. If you want to give a little bit of background, how you got into this, when you got started, and what your focus is on investing.
So I started in June of 2016, so I guess 9 years ago, but almost exactly. Um, and I started full time in real estate at that time. So I just jumped right in. I was in a corporate job and really didn't like it at all after a long time. So I jumped right in and worked with a local company that was primarily focused on investing. They did have a brokerage, but there was like a wholesale rehab operation type of a company, and I joined with them as a buyer and learned the ropes on how to find distressed properties, distressed situations, and negotiate and get good deals. And jumped right in and started doing that. Like hit the ground running and learned it pretty quick and started doing deals pretty quickly as a buyer for them. And then I started doing it on my own. Um, I guess like 5 years ago. 5 years ago now, started doing more like wholesaling on my own, rehabs on my own, and then didn't start buying any rental properties either until then as well. We bought our personal residence that was a big project, and so that sidelined everything. And then right when we finished that, I was like, all right, now I can start flipping and buying rental properties.
So
So yeah,
you're mainly doing wholesaling. You own some rentals. You also have flipped some properties, correct?
yes, yep, yep,
And
yeah.
how'd you get into, so, it sounded like, when you jumped in and you went to work for a local company, getting in investing, helping buying distressed properties, is that really what, I guess, kickstarted the wholesaling for you? And then just kind of decided, hey, I'm staying that path as opposed to full-time realtoring and doing the retail side, or buying and flipping right away and just mainly doing wholesaling?
Yeah, so when I started, I actually got my real estate license a few months before I started. So I've always had my real estate license since I've been in the business. But I mean, in my first like 3, 4 years, I would list some of the properties that our group would rehab. I would list them when we were finished. But I worked with like one buyer. I think now, not going 9 years in, I think I've worked with two buyers. And
I can't even
so
picture you working with a buyer.
yeah, I know. Well, one of them basically said, "Hey, I got a house. Can I buy it?" It was a good friend of mine, and then another person I helped her after I bought her house, and so that was it. And so I never really worked as a realtor at all, and until kind of recently, and I've determined pretty quickly that I think I know if I am the best at realtor. Um, and then yeah, so I was primarily focused on buying, and I didn't even really have to manage any of the rehabs because we had like a project management team that would do that. And then that kind of changed a little bit over the years to where we were a little more hands on with the rehabs and everything. So I don't know if that
Got it.
answers your question, but yeah.
And your main source of where you're finding business is through probate, correct?
Right now, yeah, I do that a lot now. I mean, I get some deals from agents pretty much every year. I don't work that angle as much as I should, but I still will end up with 2 or 3 or 4 deals a year from agents, which is kind of cool because I like don't work that at all. So it's like, okay, maybe I should do a little better with that. And then, but I've also done like driving for dollars worked pretty well. I mean, everything works, obviously, just like with the realtor and with everything else. It's just a matter
Good.
of like
Just
sticking to
just
it and
mainly just looking to focus in on what you've made, what's your main course of business, right? I mean, yeah, to your
that's
point,
right
you can
now. Yeah.
do anything,
Yeah.
but I think what I like about what's really on this call, you guys each are very focused on something specific. Like, again, I would call you the wholesaler. I would call Jim the overall investor, and Chris is a realtor that specializes with investors, right? I mean, all of what Chris's experience has been is working with out-of-state investors from multifamily, single-family, flipping, buy and hold, Section 8, like everything. And while I'm talking about Chris, we should just have you kind of just jump in here and kind of share your background and what your experience is. And you've even bought and flipped some houses as well and owned a short term, so you've got some similar experience. And again, trying to position this so where our listeners can understand like there's not just one way to do it. Find what works for you and run with it, right? And Chris, I think this is a good example that when you started on our team and we jumped in and kind of training you to be a realtor, we had an opportunity to put you on this investment stuff and you jumped on it, and here we are, what, 3 4 years later, and it's really worked out.
Yeah, exactly. I got my start as a landlord. I think kind of the way I think a lot of people do, where almost by accident. I was working in Iowa, had a radio job up there, really small town, so rented for a little bit, and then realized you could buy a house for $27,000. So that's what we did. And then when I left that job, put it up for sale, couldn't sell it, so we ended up renting it. So that was 94, 95. So became a landlord, rented it for about a year, and ended up selling that house. And worked corporate business to business sales for about 21 years after got out of radio and some other pit stops along the way. Worked about 21 years in business to business sales, and then during COVID, lost that job. I traveled pretty extensively for that job, so they were cutting out travel, things like that. So in 20, found myself just kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do. Now, prior to that corporate job, I had gotten my real estate license in 1998, and had only had it for a few months, and was a solo agent, no training, no idea what to do, just floundering. Was literally given a couple little magnets for my car and said, there's the sign up sheet if you want to hold an open house, go be a realtor. So literally
You still got those?
yeah, 3 or 4 months in, I had not done anything. I didn't even know how to go get business. No idea. And then that corporate opportunity came along, and I was like, well, this is not working. So let's go do that.
So the magnets didn't get you the business?
They did not. I think they were probably too small. I really think
Oh,
if they were larger, I think it would have done better. Plus, they were on the side of my bombed out '87 Pontiac Grand Am. I probably wasn't given the vibe that I was the guy to hire.
did it
Um,
have your face on it? I know you said you were your radio guy.
right? Yeah,
Hey,
I got
I
a
drove
face
a,
for
I drove an
radio.
'09 Camry until last year.
Right,
So there's not. It's all about the smile, right?
No,
right.
it's a bigger sign, clearly. So,
Yeah.
okay.
So yeah, so jump ahead to 2020. I'm not working at that point. My oldest son Tyler is actively wholesaling. So just started spending a lot of time with Tyler figuring out what he was doing, how wholesaling works. I knew nothing about it. So he was kind of teaching me how that whole side of the real estate industry worked. And then I would go, not on appointments with him, but I would go walk houses with him. And then Dave mentioned, Stelmacki mentioned driving for dollars. I would do that for Tyler. He'd be like, yeah, go here. Here's my pre-printed post-it notes. You see something with tall grass or newspapers piling up, or the signs to look for. Go do that. So went and was doing that for him, just kind of on the side to keep myself busy, and was doing a was eventually was selling home warranties, basically just like the car warranties except for a home warranty. So there was a lot of cold calls, things like that, and was sucking the life out of me. And I had used Jim as my realtor on a couple different transactions, and one day I couldn't do it anymore. So I literally just called Jim out of the blue and was like, "Man, I think I'm going to get my license. Uh, what do I do?" And luckily, Jim was like, man, I'm on a great team. It's Nations Network. And went and got my license, joined the team. And then once I got there, Dave, Nations presented an opportunity. We've got an opportunity to work with investor clients. We really need somebody to kind of spearhead it. And it fit my personality. I had been kind of working with my son, learning that side of that business for pretty much the prior year. So it was something that was really interesting to me anyway. So I took that on and just really, yeah, I mean, it really took off for me. I feel like working with those investors was a springboard to get me active and get my pipeline and my book of business going. I feel like faster than if I'd have just kept plugging away retail, because I felt like, especially on our team, I was filling a need that needed to be filled, and it just happened to be a need that I was happy to fill and I enjoyed. I enjoy working with the investors. So yeah, that was 21. So it's been about 4 years now of working primarily with investors. Still do owner occupants and things like that, but the bulk of my business is investors. Most of them are out of state. Yeah, and it's been great. I've learned a ton. Learned a lot about St. Louis neighborhoods, and that realistically, before 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't know what Dogtown was, didn't know where Tower Grove South was, and now I feel like I live in those neighborhoods. So yeah,
It's amazing to me where you live. You live in St. Charles, and how little you can know about the city, and but how much you actually do. And are in there, I'll give you a street, and you'll be like, "Oh yeah, you're fine," or "No, stay away." For how much you're down there,
right,
it's great. It's
Yeah,
what's interesting too is on your stuff. One, it was work ethic of when you started to get in here, but two, of what natural springboard you had, where the interest rates were, but where your difference is now, and how fast your stuff can move from portfolios of, hey, I need this, now I need this. So you get to learn and see a bunch of different avenues from that. Because so like multifamily was big then, and now it's now a lot of stuff is Section 8, and how to think about it differently.
yeah, and we'll get into that for sure. I
Okay.
just wanted to jump in the gun on me, but no, that definitely want him to kind of talk about that and how it's moved around and how you're navigating that. But before we do, since you're chatting, Jim, brief background. I know you've been in this for a bit, and just a little bit on the investment side. You've kind of dabbled in quite a few things, so share with everyone what your story is.
Sure. So I was in construction. It was like straight out of high school till '09. I got my license. So we did that, and then I was just a regular, it's regular, but just a real estate agent without really investing on anything for a couple years. My first rental was an accident. I couldn't sell the house for what I needed it to, so I kept it and made $100 a month on it.
That's three of us, because my first rental was an accident. I couldn't sell it either. So, Stell's, was yours an accident too?
No, the most recent one was, but it's
Yeah,
coming back.
there you go. You do this enough that everyone will end up with accidental
It
rentals.
always happens. But
Just
you know
know that.
what? That's the one house, that's the only house I've ever sold, and that's the one that I regret the most. So I usually don't sell houses.
When
But
did you
yeah, so right now we've got, so my mentor when I was younger said, just concentrate on buying one house a year and you'll be fine. I said, okay. So we started doing that, or I started doing that, and this was before I was married or anything like that. And then also at the same time, I was selling houses, rehabbing them, and then, but they weren't really mine. Like I was actually still doing the work. I was more or less GCing flips for another client of ours while I was hanging, or still a carpenter, selling real estate and then doing some GC work. It got to be too much, so I dropped the carpenter stuff and then went into full-time real estate agent and then investing, still having that motto of one a year, and then all of a sudden it's compounding effect. So now we're
How many do you have now?
34. So
34 doors or 34 properties?
I've got one 12 unit, and then the rest are single families. So
Okay. And how many do you flip a year?
Mm, let's see. I have flipped on and off for probably 10 or 12 years, but really started making a business out of it probably 3 years ago, and I'd say six. We should do six this year. I've got, yep, our fifth one's under contract right now, so
Cool.
hopefully,
And then the other
maybe.
thing you also dabble in, I say dabble, you're pretty heavy
Yes,
in storage.
yes. So originally that started out as just an investment opportunity with a guy I met at the gym. So out in O'Fallon, there's a Storco is the name of it. It just really was an investment part. So I got into that, and then had a really good relationship with the guy who runs the facilities and owns the storage. He gave me an opportunity to be owner in a ground up new build on Highway 70 and 79 out there in St. Charles County. It's about an $8 million project. So it was a lot. We learned a lot through SBAs, going through that whole process, ground up construction on something that I've never seen. There was a lot to it. Learned a lot on that. We're doing like a $3.5 million expansion on it right now. We're getting ready to close on that because it's going pretty good for us. So, and then I know there'll probably be some more opportunities down the road with that storage. So it's pretty interesting. It's a whole different ball game. I love to learn about that
Are
stuff.
you generating revenue off that storage building already?
Typically, so on on renting like residential stuff, you always look at a cash flow up door monthly income. These are longer. Something that I'm not used to. You do learn is when it's this big of a facility or even a storage facility, and when you're with an SBA, it's like a carry out for 3 years where you don't see anything. So right now we've only had our doors open for a year, and we're putting an addition on. I
How
probably
much
really
occupancy do you already have if you're already adding an addition?
we're at 50%, but which feasibility said we should be maybe we shouldn't even be in the 30 percentile yet, or we should be right about 32 percentile. So we're well above it. Now, what we're adding on is like it's a flex space contractor storage. So these are bigger units. It's not your stereotypical small 8 by 8s, 12 by 10s. These are for bigger contractors because of the location and the demographic out there. Those have been full. Actually, we have, I think, 15 units right now, and those have been full since week 3 or 4 that we opened. So we're putting on more of those units on there. So I don't expect to see any payout on that for, I don't know, probably maybe another 2 years as far as a monthly generation, like generating income from how I look at it from uh, residential. So it is different.
Okay, cool. So, Dave Stelmacki, if I'm an agent and I'm wanting to get into some investing and I'm already out selling and working as an agent, and I think, hey, I want to get into wholesaling. I feel like so many people that want to get into investing start in that wholesaling space because I can get in, I can tie it up and then flip it, and I don't necessarily have to have the cash. It's easy, whatever the thoughts are that everybody kind of throws around and has out there. What advice would you be giving to an agent if they're wanting to get into maybe doing some wholesaling and investing like you do? What would I do?
Well, you got to start trying to find motivated sellers, like
Okay.
actively. I would say, don't spend time trying to find deals on the MLS and try to find motivated sellers and get in there and get in the door and then try to find people that'll ultimately buy them or get line up some funding to where you can buy the properties. But it's also like knowing your numbers. I would say if you're going to go out and do that, to know your numbers. Otherwise, you're going to waste a lot of your time and the seller's time if you go in and just tie it up, but then you can't sell it.
Okay, so you said a lot of things here.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
first of all, finding motivated sellers. First
Yeah.
of all, or second of all, I should say that's also what we do as realtors. That's what you should be doing, right? That's what a
Yeah,
listing
yeah.
is,
Well, yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
But this is a little different than a listing, I would think.
Yeah.
because these you're not typically listing. So I guess the first part of what you said, find a motivated seller. Cool. You do this every day. What are you doing to find? How are you finding a motivated seller?
I mean, I do a lot with estates right now, but I mean, really, motivated seller is somebody that they are understanding they're taking a discount because of either the condition of the house or their life situation, and they're ready to accept a discount. The people they need to sell fast, and
They're
they know
legit motivated. They got to sell today. They're not doing repairs. They're not fixing it up. They're not doing anything
yeah,
except for selling it.
right, right.
Okay. So the next piece you said was know your numbers. What does that mean? I'm a realtor. I'm like, what do you mean know my numbers? How many people I got to call? How many appointments I need to go on? What are we talking about?
Well, yeah, you got to know those numbers too for like how many appointments to go on. But I was more thinking know your numbers on what you would offer to buy a house, because you need to know what it's worth when you fix it up. We need to know how much it costs to fix it up, and that will give you a formula. Typically, I think like the general like back of the napkin is anywhere from like the ARV, the after repair value of the house. Take 70 or 80% of that, somewhere between 70 or 80% of that, minus the cost of repairs, is typically what most offers. That's about the offer that you would need to make.
So then as a realtor, I need to go and figure out what is this house selling for when it's fixed up? What's in
Yeah,
my mind? What's it going to look like? Is it going to look like that?
yeah,
And that means it's a $400,000 house. So then I need to buy it for 70 to 80% less of that minus than my $100,000 in repairs. And
right.
then boom, that would be my purchase price. And I would go, now that's if I'm going to buy it and rehab it. If I'm going to buy it and wholesale it, knowing my numbers there, I'm assuming that's a different situation.
Well, you need to still you almost or maybe you need to get it even lower than that, so that there's enough room for someone else to buy it and rehab it. There's some different ways you can go there. If you have different buyers, if you have a buyer that's a contractor, maybe they can pay a little bit more than you because they can save money on the rehab. Yeah.
Have you ever, what happens, again, this is just a thought, if I'm an agent, I go and tie this up, I'm going to flip it to Jim or somebody else or somebody like myself that's going to buy it, but then that person doesn't. Do you get stuck with it? And then you end up eating, have you ever gotten stuck with the property? What do you do with that? These are things I'm just trying to think, if I'm an agent, what do I do next?
Yeah. Me personally, so there's a few different ways to do it. Me personally, I really don't want to put a property under contract to buy unless I am willing and actually prepared to buy it, or I know right away that I've got a partner I've worked with before that will buy it from me. I really don't want to do that. Now, there are a lot of people out there that'll go make an offer, tie a property up for 20 days they'll have a way to get out of the contract for 20 days or 30 days or whatever to try to go find a buyer. But really don't like to do that. There are people that do that, and that's how they can get out of the contract. Typically, on my deals, like if there's any contingencies at all for me to be able to get out, like if I can't find anybody to buy it from me, or if I can't find the funding or whatever, I'll have a contingency to get out of it. But it's generally like just a few days. So if you put a contingency in there to protect yourself for a few days, you can at least leave the house, take a deep breath, try to figure out, okay, what am I going to do with this house, and try to figure it out. But I think with respect to the seller and the integrity of what you're doing, going out and buying houses as is with cash, that you should try to make that quick.
Yeah, and you want to have a reputation that you can actually close, that you're not just tying it up, trying to then turn it to somebody else and you can't, and then it falls apart and you start over and all that, and then you
Yeah,
generate a bad name, right?
yeah. I
So,
had when I was with the company I used to work with, we had not many, a couple deals that I was involved with where the person that was buying it, whatever, they didn't get the money, they weren't, legit, and they couldn't close. They told us like, the day of closing, and we're like, oh shoot. Now that was a big company, so they could scramble, get some money, but we'd have to call the seller and have a hard conversation and just be like, hey, we need to push closing, a week or two, because generally they could get the money, but they couldn't get it in an hour most of the time.
yeah,
And so we just had to call the seller and have that conversation. So I really try to avoid that.
got it. Okay.
Stels, if you're looking at it from an agent getting into this and then all of a sudden they find the deal, how many people do you think that they should have in their pocket or their pipeline to be able to call to sell that to?
The buyer list.
Yeah. What a buyer list. What's ideal for that?
Um, I mean, again, it all depends. Like, there's people, you could have 200 people on your buyers list, and then you could probably sell anything, or you could have the people that I call, it's always the same few people, less than 10, probably. I
Now,
mean, I have more than
so
that,
does
but
that reflect your buyers list? It reflect on where you'll buy wholesales at because you know you can sell them right away. Like, would you stay away from other areas just in case you don't have someone of an end buyer?
yeah. But I've over the years tried to make sure I've got buyers in almost every area in the general the St. Louis metro, for the most part. I
You
don't come
gotta,
out too far your way. And
you
there's
should.
some parts of the city where it's hard to find buyers for, you know. But other than that, I've tried to find people that'll work almost anywhere.
So, Chris, on your end of the deal, you made a comment earlier about, kind of getting into this and being new and having that opportunity to jump into the investment side. I think the investment space as a realtor is a really good one to target. I think there's always a market for it, whether the market's crazy hot on the listing side, buy side, doesn't really matter. There's always real estate investors out there. If I'm an agent and I'm wanting to jump in and say, I want to work with investors, so then I can learn how to invest myself. What advice are you giving them? What should they know? What do you believe has made you a successful investor-friendly realtor that investors keep coming back to you to help them buy more property?
Hey, it's Dave. If you're a real estate agent doing well on the surface, but secretly drowning in to-dos, unsure what to delegate, and wondering how the heck you're supposed to grow this thing, you're not alone. You're stuck between hiring an assistant or a buyer's agent. Your systems live in your head, and your calendar is running you instead of the other way around. That's why I built the Cornerstone course, to help agents like you build a real estate business with clarity, confidence, and systems that actually work. And right now, it's just $100 during our summer sale, normally $397. Hit the link in the show notes and take the first real step toward growing on your terms.
Yeah, really, I think my biggest asset, and it doesn't happen fast, is that my clients trust me. And I tell them that from the beginning, and I've said this to every single client I've ever worked with is I don't want to sell you one property. I want to sell you several because I can sell you one and just take my commission and run, and it's going to be a dump and it's going to be a bad area and a bad situation, and you'll never use me again. But I'm not. I don't want to do that. That's not how I'm building my business. So I think just building that trust and really knowing what you're talking about. Um, Jim was kind of mentioning it where, like I mentioned, I didn't know a lot about the city, which tends to be where most of my business is, St. Louis City, North St. Louis County, and those areas. Those areas I was not familiar with. So I really, really immersed myself in learning what I could about different municipalities, different areas in general, and going out and walking the properties. I mean, that I think is the biggest thing that I deliver to my clients. I'm doing it Friday for a client. I mean, I do it weekly for clients is because, like I said, most of them are out of state. This particular client is in town, but he works a full-time job. So that's what I do. I will go take a 15-20 minute video, upload it to YouTube, send him that link where it's going to be as close of a facsimile of him being in that house as it possibly could be. And I know what to look for. I'm looking for the ages of the systems, how the roof condition. I'm looking at the surrounding houses. Is every other house on that street boarded up? I'm looking at rental comps and sale comps because unlike Jim, who will hold a house forever, most investors don't. They'll end up selling it at some point, scaling up or whatever their plans are. So we got to make sure that it's a good area that when they do decide to sell, we're not going to have any trouble selling it. So I think that's what sets me apart of what I call offer writers, and not to disparage that. But I've had clients reach out to me and literally send me an email and say, hey, here's 10 properties. I want you to submit offers on these. And I don't do that. That's not how I want to build my business. And you certainly can build a business that way. You can fire off 10 offers and see what sticks. But the reason I don't like doing that is because then you're doing your due diligence after you're under contract. And Stelmacki made a good point when he brought up reputation. And that is one thing I'm very protective of is my reputation. I don't want to be known as the guy that just shoots out low ball offers. I don't want to be the guy that is constantly releasing from contracts over every little thing. I also don't want to be the guy that is, once we're under contract, now we're renegotiating price because I've come up with this, and this. I want this contract to close and everybody to be happy at the end of it. And the only way you get there is by doing your due diligence up front. And so that's why will never hesitate that if somebody calls me and says at 9 a.m., hey, that house you sent me over there in Glasgow Village looks pretty good. When can you see it? I'm like, cool, I'll be there at noon and I'll shoot you the video, because that's how I want to run my business. Because I want to know when we go under contract that thing's going to close, that there's a 95% chance it closes, not a 5% chance. So that's how I would teach it. Again, there's people that will just throw offers out and see what sticks. That's not how I operate, and that's not how I would teach someone to do it if I was recommending somebody to start working with investor clients. But like I said, the main thing is know your neighborhoods, know your municipalities, know if there's rental restrictions in certain municipalities, know all the ins and outs, know if occupancy inspections are more difficult in a certain municipality than others, or Section 8, or know what fair market rents are. All that stuff where if someone calls you and says, what do you think about this house? Your answer is more than just, oh, it looks pretty good. It's, oh, here's market rent, here's fair market rent, here's the ARV, here's the rental restrictions in that area, if there are any, and here's when I'll go walk it for you.
Hey, Chris, what's the difference between market rent and fair market rent?
So fair market rent is essentially the Section 8 rent. So yeah, there's a website that I keep that tab open on my computer, and it lays out every single zip code in St. Louis City and St. Louis County by bedroom size. So if you tell me, or if you ask me what's a 3-bedroom in 63137 rent for, what's the fair market rent, I can pull it up and tell you what that Section 8 rent would be. And I usually tell everybody, figure on about 85% of whatever that stated fair market rent. That's the max Section 8. And it's rare to get the max, so calculate for about 85% of that. But I can get you close, and like I said, those are tabs I keep open.
Perfect. So trust, know your neighborhoods. Those are some key components in really building that investor book of business. Jim, on your end, so you made the comment you don't typically sell anything. So if I'm an agent and I'm getting into this and I'm buying and holding and I hold everything, how am I continuing to afford to continue to buy more? How am I managing this? How do I put all that together? I mean, you went from 1 to 34 doors, and quite a few of them in a short order of time. You also have an interesting setup on how you do your financing and all that, and you have some interesting, plans, goals as to why you're holding yours. But you have a little more background on that buy and hold strategy that you have.
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't say I don't sell everything, because obviously the flips, things like that, anything that I wouldn't want close, I've got a pretty sectioned off area of where I would like to rent, compared, relatively speaking, to the metro area, right? So anything in there, I'm going to keep it and I'm going to rent it. The stuff that's outside of that box, I don't even look at or consider even renting it or keeping it or renting it, no matter what. I bought it with the sole intention to flip it. So, my my strategy was kind of, again, by accident in the very beginning. I looked at debt as something that was bad. So I was single, living like really far below my means. I bought a house. It was horrible. I moved into it. I fixed it all up. And then I went and sold it, and I bought 2 of them. And I still was living really far below my means, and then I added one to my portfolio. So then in 9 months, I actually just paid that house off. And then I did it again in 9 months and paid another house off that I was living in. So I had 2 different properties that were free and clear, and I thought, man, this is awesome. It's just straight cash flow. And then I realized, I'm like, man, I've got a lot of money just sitting there I'm not utilizing, right? Because that's the other flip the coin, is to really leverage yourself out to where you can build it faster. I realized that was what I was missing out on. So I actually just took the two properties and then I went to a local bank that I know and have got a good relationship now. And I put them on a line of credit so I could easily access the equity in there. So right out of the gate, I was starting out, I don't know, it's probably like a $250,000 line of credit. That would allow me to either buy a flip. I didn't have to secure funding for it. I could just go buy it and then flip it, sell it, pay off the line, take the amount of money I made and do whatever I want with it. I did that for a couple more years, where I just kept doing that and paid off a couple more houses. And I think, so my line right now, I've got like a $1.2 million line of credit, from just doing that thought process from when I was younger. Those houses are still paid off. Like, God, besides the 12 family loans, I don't know, I've got, I think, 6 loans right now. So the cash flow is pretty good. And right when you get to this part of it, it's like, okay, now you're really starting to live off and be able to go faster with the cash flow. But it is a long road and it was unintentional. I just happened to get it. The other thing about that is the line of credit is what essentially opened the door for me to get into storage. Because if I wouldn't have the line of credit, I probably wouldn't have been able. It wouldn't have been an opportunity or a good opportunity for my business partner to ask me to be a part of that because of the amount of liquidity that I had.
So one real estate investment led into a much larger one, just based on how you kind of
Right.
put out.
Yeah. Well, now it's a little bit more strategic, right? Like, how do I get this down faster? How do I find more liquidity? I'm okay with debt. I'm totally fine with debt, comfortable with it. As long as I have 0 consumer debt besides houses. So still live below means from, maybe what I could, but, and now essentially what I do is my standard of living only goes up when my rental portfolio income goes up. No matter what I make from my real estate sales or from anything else, I don't even see that money. That money goes straight onto the line and pays it off to help my liquidity standpoint and my cash flow standpoint every month.
So what I hear is Jim is incredibly disciplined. The way you're running it, how you're doing this. Most people are generating that kind of cash flow and they're like, sweet. Next thing you know, they roll up in like a Ferrari that they got a loan on and whatever. They're going on trips. They're just spending it all. You're not spending any of it in that way. You're taking it and putting it, just continuing to reinvest, and it's just continued to balloon out. And now it's starting to get bigger because the portfolio is bigger, and you're seeing the compounding effect because of it.
Yeah, it just happens a lot faster. It's not like we live off rice and beans. My wife's retired, which is great. She was a school teacher, and it's the best thing that ever happened is for her to be at home with the kids. Allows her to do her stuff and all of that. So it's not like I'm watching, in every penny or anything like that. But yeah, there's definitely a plan, and it's all about execution.
So this question is for any one of you guys. Everyone can answer it. One of you, it doesn't matter. And this kind of leads into what you're kind of talking about now, Jim, and lifestyle and stuff. So what has investing in real estate done for you guys? Whether you've bought 34, whether you bought a couple, whatever it is, right? Each one of you guys have had experience in this. What has investing done for you?
Think bigger. Oh my God, I'm thinking about this now, and how I used to think when I just had a W-2, which is fine, it's great, but I couldn't even fathom I would be in a position where I'm at now, or be able to think like. I actually think that dream that I'm thinking about right now is possible. There's a pathway to it. That's the best thing ever. It's almost like, and I do this every once in a while, I go buy a lottery ticket just to play that game in my head.
One's sitting on your desk right now.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it. I'll go buy one like maybe once a month, a couple months, or when you see that big $1.2 billion
Yeah, that's when the
jackpot.
odds are in your favor. It makes sense that you would buy it then.
Yeah, exactly. But you think about it, and I've actually done this too. It's like, you know what? Everything that I'm talking about or thinking about with this lottery ticket, I think I can get it through this way, through hard work, which I'm not opposed to taking an easy path. But even if I don't win the lottery, which is a small chance, I think I can still do this. That's what real estate has done for me. And how you think about it, like the way you think about everything in life, every business opportunity, when I wouldn't think this way unless I got into investing earlier and learned the easy way, the hard way, or through other conversations of other investors, or like what you guys are sharing right now. Mike, well, I never thought about it like that, but you just get so wrapped up in it. I love it. It's the best thing ever.
Chris, Dave, either of you guys have an answer to that? If not, not a big deal.
Yeah, I think because I've only, done a couple of investment properties. I did buy one of my clients' houses, bought it from them subject to, so bought it with creative financing, was running as a midterm rental, then converted it to a long-term rental. Ended up selling that house, flipped a house last year, and made some money off of that. So that was my first flip. So to come out of my first flip and make some money, I was just really wanting to have the experience and get it done and have like a proof of concept for myself. I mean, obviously it works, as everyone here knows, but I needed to know that I could do it. So to come out on the other side and see that it works, I'm like, yeah, that's now I've got a little extra capital to work with to keep doing this because that's kind of my my internal or my personal plan is because I'm not flush with liquidity is more flips to build up that liquidity to start bringing down the buy and hold stuff for the long term because I've set myself up that has to be my retirement. I don't have an out. I don't have a second option for what I'm going to live off of on my retirement. It's going to be what I generate over the next 10, 12 years in real estate and buy and hold and all my investments is how I'm going to live once I decide to just quit selling real estate. So hearing stories like everybody's here, which is all in investing, but all different, but also working with my own clients too, is you just hear how people are doing things, which is huge because everybody kind of has their own agenda or how they do their version of real estate investing. And it's great for me because you can take pieces from everything you hear. I'm just at the point now where I'm a very I'm a cautious investor and I need to get over some of that and be a little riskier. Um, because I'm not a spring chicken, so I don't have 30 more years to build that portfolio up. I'm on a pretty short timeline, so everything can't be a 100% guaranteed slam dunk moving forward. So that's my biggest personal hurdle is just being more aggressive with pulling stuff down and getting the flips and getting them going. Um, but again, being immersed in it helps because you hear so many different stories and versions of how people are being successful at it that literally there's a million different ways to do it and people succeed in all those different ways. Buying notes, buying paper, that's a thing I didn't even know about until a year and a half ago, and I was like, oh, you can just buy loans and cash flow.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like Jim said, when you're working a W-2, all of this just seems like someone else's dream. You hear of, oh, he's a real estate investor, he's a real estate mogul. You're like, yeah, I don't even know how somebody becomes that. And then you get into it and you're like, oh, there's a million different avenues to become that.
Yeah. Perfect. I've got another question for you guys. Long-term goals. Chris, I think you sort of touched on what yours really are there. Dave, Jim, by doing what you're doing, have you guys set out long-term goals? Where is this planning on taking you? What's this look like for you in the next 3, 5, 10 years kind of thing?
It's funny, Jim. I was going to say almost the same thing you said about like getting into real estate, but it goes Lynn's the same question for me. So long-term goals. So for me, it's interesting because I really love what I do, and like I love real estate. So I do have long-term goals, but they're like so simple. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I need to make them more complicated or whatever. But it's basically for the next 8 or 10 years, be really involved with my kid, because that's really my only chance until he moves out. And hopefully it's closer to 8 years than 10 years because he's 10 years old. But be really involved with him. He's homeschooled, help with that. And honestly, it's just stay in the game, keep buying rental properties slowly but surely, and stay healthy and have a good relationship with my wife. Because it's like, okay, if I buy a handful of rentals, maybe one a year or even less for the next 8 years, my son moves out. I've done a good job with him. I got a great relationship with my wife. I'm healthy and I can still play hockey and play golf and go snowboarding. And now I've got some rental properties. I'm not even 50 and it's all going to, and then I still want to work. What else am I going to do? I really love what I do and I love real estate. But at the same time, just the other day, I was thinking about, I love like Mexico, and I was something came up where I was looking at these haciendas. I always like I'm like, man, it'd be really cool to have one of those like haciendas in Mexico that's 7,000 square feet with a few different houses and like a ranch and all that. So I look them up online, on real estate. Like I said, I love real estate and properties, so I'm looking them up, and I'm like, that's cool. But Jim, because of like just the same thing you just said about thinking bigger, I did not 10 or 12 years ago when I was working at my corporate job, it was too much to think that I could get away and ask my boss for a 10-day vacation, or that I could maybe sneak out, two Fridays from now at 1 o'clock to play golf with my buddies. Like that was consuming my mind, and that was it. But now, like a couple of days ago, I was like looking at these haciendas, and I'm like, my thought was immediately was like, well, okay, how could I buy one of those? It wasn't, oh, that would be cool one day. Wow, that would really be neat or whatever. It was immediately just like, well, how would I actually do it? Well, what specifically would I do? How would I do it? How much would I have to make? Like, and it just goes through my mind, and it was kind of one of those things where it was cool. And I don't know that I'll ever buy one of those. It didn't make it to my priorities or goals just yet, but it could, and it's anything's possible because you talk to people all the time in this business that are doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's like, well, I mean, it's just a whole other world. So yeah. So no, my long-term goals, I don't know. They're very, very good.
Hacienda in Mexico. That's what I heard.
Maybe,
Okay.
maybe
I'm holding you
you
to
guys
it.
want to invest. I got some good deals coming.
Maybe you. Okay. Anybody else have anything to add on that? Before I got one more question after that.
Yeah, I'm gonna like the long term stuff. I figure I'm gonna hit when I hit 50,000 a month in rental income. It's just a number. There's strategy behind that number. I'll probably stop and pay off as fast as I can with everything. I think it gives me options. So, and we're probably not talking to a whole lot of people that's got like W-2s, right? But we are 1099s and we are selling, and it's always where's the next sale? Where's the next paycheck coming from? So I really got to think about it like that. Like, it's okay that something is falling apart and it's not going in a transaction, and it's not going to wreck my household. I don't have to give up my money to keep the deal together. I don't need to do these things because I've worked hard enough for it. Plus, I know that my value is there to help these people sell their house. It's just certain predicaments come up that are outside of my control. So I'm really not going to need to worry about that. And to think about that from a real estate standpoint, where how much would someone love real estate if they could take out the insecurity of a paycheck?
You're not attached to the outcome.
Yeah, it is.
Having
It
real
is.
estate investing has allowed you to be able to be detached from the outcome as a realtor and show up differently because you're not worried that, like, I need this to happen in order to get paid, to pay my bills, to keep the electric on, kind of thing, right?
Yep.
That's
Yep.
a fantastic point. I love it. So I heard, the other thing between the three of you guys, all of you guys love what you do and seem to really enjoy it. I think it also seems to tie into the freedom flexibility that it's creating, and you guys kind of dictating what you're doing and how you're doing it and when you're doing it, and whether you're doing it from Mexico or from St. Charles, doesn't matter. You get to do it where you want and how you want, and I think that that's awesome as well. And I think that that's what investing allows people to be able to do, and be a little more picky and choosy on what they're doing, how they're doing it. Before we wrap, last question for each one of you guys, no more than like a minute, because I do want to wrap this up. But I always end the podcast with, what's the funniest thing that's happened to you in real estate? So what, since you've been in it, share something funny that's happened to you. It could be anything. What you got? Who wants to go first?
You guys have to have some good stories on
Well,
this. I'm trying to.
The houses you guys have seen, the people you guys probably interacted with, the deals you've done. I mean, there's so many funny things that occur in this business, especially when you get into the investment side of things.
I mean, the first couple that come to mind are probably not for public consumption. I will say, I don't know how funny it is, but I will just say, if you are an investor agent, it is very likely that if you do this long enough, you are going to walk into a vacant house to shoot your video, and you will not be alone. Someone will be in that house. My flip that I did in South St. Louis, I had a repeat squatter who I just could not seem to get rid of. So again,
Hey, at least you had one person that
right.
loved your rehab.
That became funny. It wasn't funny at first. It became funny just from the sheer willingness of this guy to no matter how well it was boarded up, to find his way back in. So it became almost comical and a little bit impressive. But some of the funnier things, I just things found in dumpsters and stuff like that. I don't know if I want to share those. I will just say I found a mannequin mold in a dumpster, and I'll shoot you guys the picture offline.
Okay, Stels, what do you got? What's the funniest thing that you've come into happened to you?
There's been a lot of funny stuff, but kind of like Chris, I don't know if it's like funny. But I do go into some really bad houses. My idea of a bad house, or specifically my idea of a hoarder house, is way different than the average person. I have a scale where it's like hoarder, you can't move. It's hoarder trash, or it's like organized clean hoarder, I call it. And I kind of have said for the last several years, like, my gauge is, I would eat a sandwich in there. That's kind of my gauge, that I would sit down and eat a sandwich in there. And I was with some friends a few weeks ago and was showing them this house that I went into that was, I would not eat a sandwich in. It was the worst I'd ever seen. It was so full you couldn't even walk in there. But I was explaining to them, I was like, well, I went in this other one, but yeah, I sat with the lady on two or three occasions and had a cup of coffee with her. I would have eaten a sandwich in there. And they thought it was hilarious. And I showed them a picture of the house that I was talking about, that I said I would have eaten a sandwich in. And they were like, you would eat a sandwich in there? I'm like, yeah, it was pretty clean.
I love that it's a sandwich.
Yeah.
And by the way, would you eat a sandwich in Bennett?
No. I wouldn't eat a sandwich in there. No.
I just want to know where your levels are.
I think I'm a pretty clean guy. So, I mean, I don't know. You guys, there's places that I would eat a sandwich in. I think all three of you guys would eat sandwiches there too.
So if you're buying a wholesale from Stell's, ask him what a sandwich scale is on this, so you get a kind
Bring
of.
some sub sandwiches.
Totally doing this at some point. Jim, what do you got?
Man, I think probably a hoarder's just a nightmare of things. I think it cost, like, this was 7-8 years ago, so it wasn't quite, the prices weren't so high, but it was probably like $8,000 to get out, to demo it out, which is not touching walls, not ripping draw out. This is just taking stuff out. And there was everything under the sun that you can imagine, and you wonder, why do people keep this? You know what I mean? It just gets away from them. It don't really happen. I mean, my stuff's been pretty easy, straightforward. So.
Well, I'll wrap with you talk about hoarders. We bought a house years ago, and we got really lucky because the house was already demoed. And I said, well, what happened? Well, it was a hoarder's house, and unfortunately, the furnace broke, and they couldn't get to it. because there was so much stuff in the house, right? Well, the furnace broke, so there was no heat. And when there was no heat, then the pipes froze. And then when the pipes froze, then the pipes burst. And then when the pipes burst, water went everywhere. And then when the water went everywhere, it ruined everything. Well, while the water was sitting there because nobody could get in to do anything about it, mold grew everywhere. And then it just kept unraveling into a nightmare. And I guess the insurance company came along and helped, clear it all out. They demoed the entire inside of the house. They had to because it was covered in mold, got rid of all the stuff, everything. Got a brand new drain tile system, sump pump system put in to prevent water. Although that wasn't really the problem was. It was the frozen pipes that had caused that water, but ended up getting to buy a house to rehab that was already gutted down to the studs, had brand new air conditioner and furnace, and sump pump drain tile system. So sometimes a hoarder house turns into a really good deal for you. You just gotta know what end of the deal you're on.
Absolutely.
But anyways, well, guys, I appreciate you chiming in today and joining me on this podcast, and hopefully helping educate some fellow realtors out in the world on what it's like to invest in real estate, and sharing some great options that you guys shared today. For all of our listeners, viewers, thanks for watching another episode of Realty Resilience, and stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Realty Resilience. Be sure to join our free Realty Resilience Facebook group, where real estate professionals connect, share strategies, and access resources. You can also follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, or subscribe to our YouTube channel for more insights. And remember, we release new episodes every 2 weeks. See you next time.